Hello ladies and gentlemen, Z Dreams here, and today I have a big announcement to make about the LastEpoch. They're releasing their biggest patch update. It's the Convergence update for beta 0.9 patch notes. I'd like to do a little bit of a review on it, why I'm going to try this game out with this patch drop, and why I think you should too. So for those of you that don't know what the LastEpoch is, it's an upcoming hack and slash action role-playing game, which is in early access and was developed by American-based international studio 11th Hour Games. In April of 2018, a free playable demo was released as part of the LastEpoch's Kickstarter drive. In April 2019, the game's beta was made available via Steam Early Access. For those of you that are thinking about playing this game, there's a list of 5 different classes you can choose from. You have an Acolyte, a Mage, a Primalist, a Rogue, and a Sentinel, all of which have their own 3 subclasses. You do have a talent tree that can reflect your playstyle in which you want to accommodate, giving you options of passives and skills that you can choose from. So a common question that gets asked is, can you respec your talent tree? Yes, you can respec your talent tree, but it is at a cost. It's not a currency cost, but experience instead. So the common rule of thumb is that you do not want to respec until you are in the late game, where experience gains are easy to make and you don't have too many diminishing returns. So at this point you could be thinking to yourself, wow, this sounds a lot like Path of Exile, or wow, this sounds a lot like Diablo. Well, you wouldn't be wrong in that sense, but something I think that the LastEpoch is going to accomplish better than both of these games is that it's going to have endgame balance. So in Diablo, I feel like things aren't complex enough. The endgame is a repetitive grind and you do the same thing over and over. It's very straightforward, you're just farming your tier sets and min-maxing your character. Whereas in Path of Exile, I feel like the endgame gets a little too complex, where a lot of player base falls off in the endgame because for one, they don't want to rely on a guide, and 2, it's just too difficult to figure out on your own. Now, one could argue, Z Dreams, how can you say this? You've never even played the LastEpoch. You said so yourself. Well, I'll tell you what I have played. I have played thousands of hours of Diablo and thousands of hours of Path of Exile. And I know where their strengths and weaknesses are. And of course, with the LastEpoch, I did my research before I purchased the game. I did a deep dive on the Reddit posts, a deep dive on the Steam comments, and I found all the answers I was looking for. Now that we have a little bit of a grasp on what the game is about, let's look a little bit more into the end game and see what it has to offer for us. So to give a quick overview of the endgame mechanics, we'll start off with the Monolith of Fate. The Monolith of Fate contains timelines, each of which tells an alternative flow of events. They can be progressed to their end in order to receive a blessing that grants various buffs to the character. Each timeline can be progressed by completing its echo missions, each having a specific zone map and quest objective. Echoes also grant modifiers to enemies, increasing item rarity and experience gained, which can last to a set number of echoes. Timelines also contain 3 quest echoes each, which are milestones in progressing the story of the timeline. These can be unlocked once the timeline garnered enough stability. Completing the final quest echo also completes the timeline, conquering it. Timelines are interconnected on the world map, and they can be unlocked successfully by unlocking paths in their stories. One of the easiest game mechanics to compare this to would have to be the Atlas mapping system in Path of Exile. The next game mechanic I'd like to talk to you about is the arena. The arena is a place where players will have to fight never-ending waves of enemies. To access the arena, you have to go to a town called the End of Time. There is a little red portal inside this town that you have to use a key in order to access the arena. These keys can be found from the Monolith of Fate. Now, while in the arena, the player is facing a continuous swarm of enemies who spawn in waves. The waves consist of 4 groups spawning on designated spots of the arena. The number of enemies spawned in each group scales with the wave number and the player's level, and weaker enemies will be spawned in greater numbers than stronger enemies. Once there is only one enemy left, or all enemies and the last one is one of the bosses, then the next wave will spawn. As players complete waves without dying, the wave counter will go up. As the wave counter goes up, the health and damage of the mobs increases, as well as the experience that is awarded for killing them. After every 5th wave, the next will not start automatically. A number of containers are spawned that scale with the player's level, as well as the wandering blacksmith and the stash. To continue the next wave, the player must click the Start Next Wave UI button. Upon doing so, all items on the ground will disappear, as well as the blacksmith and the stash. After every 10 waves completed, the arena will restart in a random map. Dying in the arena will result in a restart in a random map with the wave counter reset to 0. Moving on to last but not least, the dungeon. Dungeons are a game feature and a type of repeatable content. You can gain access to them as early as level 22, scaling all the way up into the late game. Dungeons can be accessed from certain zones on the world map. Their waypoint also becomes available once visited. A dungeon requires a specific dungeon key to enter, which is expended on use and cannot be regained. These have a slightly low chance to drop from rare monsters and bosses above a certain area level. Dungeon is an optional area that contains a number of subzones with a unique challenge and reward, making them compelling to complete over and over again. And just like other endgame features, dungeons have varying zone level and consequently difficulty and rewards through several tiers. Initially, only the first tier is unlocked, with successive tiers unlocking as a dungeon is completed. Higher tiers increase the strength of monsters found, as well as the rarity and quantity of loot. The tier for a dungeon instance is determined by the player upon entry. Tier modifiers rotate on a daily basis while progressing through a dungeon. So, giving a quick recap here on my personal thoughts and take on these endgame mechanics. The Monoliths of Fate, I think, is going to be a lot of fun to see what kind of storylines come to play, or missions. And like I mentioned, it's a very similar style to Path of Exile's mapping in the Atlas. The progress, I think, is going to just be linear. As soon as you hit endgame, you'll be doing it from the beginning of endgame all the way to the end of endgame, with bosses being at certain Monoliths of Fate. Whereas the arena, I feel I could compare this to more of a Diablo 3 Greater Rift style, where you min-max your character, you see how many waves you can take on, and see what your character's potential really is. Meanwhile, they add a leaderboard that kind of puts a fun edge and competitiveness to the game. And then the dungeons at the end, I don't think I mentioned this, but they have a giant gold sink, which I think is unique to this game. Once you complete the dungeon, you have to go through a series of questions of what rewards you want to be in your chests. Depending on which questions they ask you is going to vary on how expensive it is to get those rewards. And I think that's a refreshing take, since in most games I feel like you end up with all this endgame currency that you don't have any use for, and there's no way to get rid of it, and there's no real drive to obtain more of it. Whereas this, you will basically be deleting your currency as fast as you can obtain it. One of the last things I'd like to talk about before I get a little bit more into this patch and why it's so exciting is the item rarity and crafting systems that are in the LastEpoch. So there are 6 different rarities of equipment that you can obtain, ranging from common, which is a white item, magic, blue item, rare, yellow item, unique is orange, set is green, exalted purple, and legendary is red. Where what determines the value of these items is how many stats have been rolled onto this item, which you can later on either upgrade or change with the crafting system in the LastEpoch. So affixes are the modifiers on equipment that exist in addition to the implicits. They can be present on the item when it is dropped, or they can be added or modified later through crafting using shards. The number of affixes on an item often determines its rarity. Now, implicits are different. All equipment has stats that are inherent to it, which are called implicits. For example, all worn boots have an increased movement speed implicit. Using the affix shards on an item can add new affixes to the item, or to increase the tier of an existing affix by 1. An item can have up to 2 prefixes and 2 suffixes, and each affix can be crafted up to tier 5. Now, runes and glyphs are modifiers that can have various effects on an item. They even can allow the re-rolling of implicits on an item. But for the sake of this video, I'm not going to get too in depth with runes and glyphs and save them for another time. Okay, jumping over to the Convergence update, beta 0.9 multiplayer patch. This is a huge update to the LastEpoch community, enabling multiplayer across the entire game pretty much, campaign arenas, dungeons, and Monolith Of Fate. And even above all that, there are balance reworks, there are new enemies, additional map features, and honestly this patch is so big I won't be able to cover all of it. So I'm just going to jump to the main points on why I'm excited for this patch and why you will see me playing the multiplayer beta that is happening March 9th, 2023. And yeah, I hope you guys enjoy it. So starting with the most anticipated part of this patch is the multiplayer feature. Of course, everyone loves to play with their friends. Most games can seem a little stale without the camaraderie of your friends going crazy, trolling each other, and just overall having a great time. So with partying being enabled, you'll be able to play with a friend at any time. Simply add them to your friends list. A hotkey is H, or right click their name in chat and invite them to the party. When they join, you can right click their icon and select Portal to Player. It is very simple. Other players in your party will be able to join the same zone instances as you, but from what I've heard, this causes a loading screen for everyone. I'm not sure if that's being fixed with this patch or not, but they suggest that everyone moves together as much as possible in order to limit how many loading screens you have to endure. Now, in towns, the skills are not able to be used in towns in preparation of future town functionality. And then the loot is instanced, so you're gonna have to pick it up all individually. It doesn't drop for everyone, only drops for you, so I'm not sure how they're gonna tie this in as far as the loot filters go. Since everyone has their own loot filters that are specified for themselves, it might be a little hard to catch other items that your friends actually need. So maybe get together with your friends, select a party loot filter or make one for your friends and give it a go. This is kind of the whole point of beta, is to work out little things like this, and that is probably the biggest issue I can see with this multiplayer patch being released. Now, the enemies do scale. They gain additional health based on the number of players, but I don't think that their damage is scaling, simply for the fact that you don't want to be in a group of, let's say, 4 people and all of a sudden they have 4 times the amount of damage and you're squishy, mage in the back lines, and then you just get one tapped. Okay, item gifting. If a piece of equipment or an idol drops while you are in the same zone as other players in multiplayer, that item can now be gifted to one of those other players by right-clicking their portrait and selecting gift item. You can gift an eligible item later on, including in another zone, but you need to be on the same server as the person you want to gift the item to. Items received as a gift can be re-gifted later to other valid players, so I'm assuming valid players are people that were in the party when the item dropped. Runes, glyphs, shards, and keys cannot be gifted. Crafting does not prevent an item from being gifted. Items received from a shop or a gambler cannot be gifted. Items from enemies, breakables, chests, monolith rewards, and arena rewards can be gifted. Oh, that's pretty nice. Trade functionality. Item gifting is the only way to send items to other players in beta 0.9. We've recently announced another trade system that we plan to implement in a future update, which you can read more about here. I highly suggest that you guys go take a look at that. I don't have time in this video to cover it all, but if you guys want to, I'll have the link in the description below, and it really looks like the developers are doing some really cool stuff. Alright, moving on to dungeons. Multiplayer gameplay. A party will use one key per run to enter the dungeon, which, let me remind you, those keys cannot be traded, so this is a great way to save on keys, is by running with a party. You can definitely get a lot more volume in, rather than when you were by yourself and you could only use your own keys. All players participating in the dungeon run must be in the starting zone before the key is used. First player that clicks on the door to the boss arena at the end of the dungeon will bring up a prompt for all players. So that's kind of like Diablo 3, you know, before you enter a boss room, the prompt is accept or decline. For the people that decline, the boss fight will still continue and those players get left behind or they join in later. You cannot use a player portal to go to party members within a dungeon if you are outside the dungeon. Party members that either die in the dungeon or leave the dungeon run via waypoint, player portal, or town portal cannot re-enter the dungeon. So this is pretty straightforward. You're either in the instance or you're out of the instance, and try not to die. Now the arena seems pretty straightforward as well. It's similar to the dungeon, as a party will use one key per run to enter the arena. You can join an arena run. Your party has started until 10 waves after the start of the run. Party members will vote on which arena modifiers to apply to the current run. In a tie, the left option wins. So the left option being, I assume, the first option. If there isn't a mod to vote on, each player can decide if they want to leave or continue. The run continues once everyone has readied up or left. Added an NPC for respecting passive points in Champions Gate. I'm not sure about any of that since I haven't played the game yet, but it seems awesome. Fixed arena pack size modifiers having 75% increased effect for ice elementals rather than 75% reduced effect. Less ice elementals will spawn at once in the arena. That also sounds like the arena might have gotten nerfed to make it a little bit easier for party play and with the scaling HP. Alright, so going back behind some of the mechanics, I'm not going to go over all of these, but I am going to go over the XP gain and zone level scaling since they seem to play into this patch and are new for everyone. If you are playing alone or at the highest level party member, you will gain reduced experience from enemies. So if you're a higher level, or you're the highest level in your party, you're not going to get as much experience as the rest of your party that's lower than you. Gaining XP as if the zone was your level, plus 10. If you are not the highest level player, this threshold is reduced by the level disparity between you and the highest level player, minimum of 2. System with a similar end effect exists in 0.8.5, but the threshold was 5 levels and did not apply in the campaign zones. If you are more than 5 levels below the expected level for the start of the chapter, quests in that chapter will award proportionately less XP based on your level. So that's interesting. If you're over leveled, you ain't gonna get as much XP even from the quests. In non-combat zones that previously scaled to the character's level, now the UI scales. It shows a value for dodge chance depending on your character's level, but the zone level itself does not change. So in this sense, it's almost like WoW, like classic WoW, where your level does matter to, your stats actually are weighed based off of the level of your enemy, which is kind of cool. And now you will no longer gain experience while dead. In one of the devs live streams with Zizarin, he was getting all the XP even though he was dead sitting in a graveyard and he was leveling up, and they do not want people to exploit this, so obviously it also makes 0 sense on why you would be getting experience while you're dead, so they took it out of the game. Kudos. So for all of you experienced players out there, I'm sure you're really excited for this part of the patch. I wish that I knew more about this game, that I had played it so that I could touch down a little bit more on this. I'll probably be doing videos on different builds and things that I have found personally once I start playing the game. So I won't be going over this because there's just so much to go over. But this obviously shows just how much the devs really care about this game and balancing, and that a lot of people can get to play the classes and the subclasses that they enjoy the most without worrying about, will this take me to endgame or not? Is it viable? Because let's just not get into how many games are out there where subclasses just feel completely pointless because you can't clear any content at all, and it just really gets under your skin and you end up quitting the game. And so I hope you guys are gonna join me this Thursday and playing the open beta for multiplayer, and I'm super excited for it. I hope you guys are too. If you guys would do me a favor, comment down below what you think I could do better, what you guys would like me to cover topics on or do future videos for. Hit that like button, subscribe, notification bell, you know the drill. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.
So back to what I was saying. Could be us.